The kaleidoscopic tongues of the stars tasted the earth. Fire like fluid crawled out of it. The maddening hatred of the palate was not quenched. However, tempered to solemnity it is. After all, eons upon eons are mere moments, and flashes are eternal. Revolving and moving straight, great distances are just a step away, and its dimensionless size is infinitely massive. Transformed to peek into the universe, dragon, demon, also known as Anax, Allo, Nuos, Animus, Xeno. Strange and alien mind and soul. Why? It does not need any why, let alone explain it to the dirt. Paradoxes may be absurd, but may also be true. Before the collision of the four galaxies, the Andromeda, the Milky Way, and the two Magellanic Clouds, humanity barely escaped the disaster by daringly leaping into the void. However, they found themselves on the opposite side of the same disaster they left. They tried to leap out from different angles, but each time they mysteriously returned in fewer numbers and cooled down to a new galaxy. And so, they named this new galaxy Elysia. Meanwhile, slowly sapping into the galaxy and encroaching from the outside, creatures of mania enter, proliferating their corruption. Hominids, so called sapiens, primates, creatures of flesh and bone, thinking you are so special, thinking that your brains and fingers make you better than the pests, insects, and rodents you stomp on. And yet here you are, running around in a circle, assuming that you have improved. The dragon, the annex, speaks to Aurelius Volclaw, also known as Avul, through his thoughts as he walks through the woods. A stinging sensation clawed at his brain each time the monster spoke. Whenever the voice paused, there was the same loop of agonizing screams and live visions of people melting away into mud. From the puddle he was standing in, he looked around. He saw a dense forest filled with fireflies, and through the leaves up in the sky were the moon and stars. Avol was excited that the annex chose to reveal himself. My light and my dark, my shadow and my sun. Sol umbra meos. Current jolted through Avol's brain. His will and mind lucid. His light soulless. Clashed against the dragon's mania. The dragon did not break, however. It simply refused to continue the push and pull. And so the masquerade withered. The lively forest crumbled away to reveal a wasteland. The ground was soaked by rotten viscera. He was knee-deep in a dark viscous fluid, bubbling from gases of decay. The trees were gone, and their place were fragments of pillars, rotten stumps, and vehicle wreckage. The sight goes from the horizon on one side to the horizon on the opposite side. Glowing embers float around. Burnt remains of bones, plants, clothing, and plastic flow through the wind. Avol had to wipe his visor clean of them. His suit was airtight, keeping any stench and pollutants out. It is covered in multiple layers of armor. The outermost were metallic plates, now soaked in gray water. He looked up through the great clouds of ash. There was only a quarter of the moon left intact. Around it were sporadic sparks in the distant space above them. Many battles waged on, filled with belligerents who only know of Elucidator from legends and tales. No one other than him can see through the death-touching aurora-filled nightmare jungle that engulfs around the moon's orbit, the sphere of annihilation, the sphere of alienation. Owl, the dark side talons, Huzzar, Sir Owl, Sir Alec Wilton Lee, the dragon uttered. Maybe. I know you, Sarkani. You Annex. Did not get that information on your own. The Annex chuckled. You know much that I would like to know more about. Far ahead of him was a tall stone tower, reminiscent of a bygone time long before the galactic clash. It was encased in an incomplete human skeleton. The parts of the torso were what was present. He tried to rip and unveil the deceit. Nothing changed, because as he found, it was not a deception. It truly was stone and bones. The beast was no longer hiding. They have been sneaking around each other for a while now, both trying to pounce on the other before the other found him first. The provocation of this annex was more of an invitation. With a thought, the nerves down his back and all the way to his fingertips ignite. The circuits of Avol's suit jolted to life. A pair of wings sprouted from his back. They both knew that whoever spoke first would reveal themselves. The scathing, gnawing, and boiling. Al can sense them, many of them humans, all through the whole volume of the tower. Their minds and nerves all driven far beyond humans evolved to handle. They were constantly reset in order to be scrambled again and again and again. It would have taken much more effort for a less competent annex to cloak, especially with all of that. Avo looks up. He tries to find the ship from outside of the sky. The sphere of alienation is still too dense. The annex says, your willingness to climb and advance outweighed by your short-sightedness. Today, tomorrow, already have you signed your death. You will die in the same roundabout path paved by the countless before you. For the better of others, however, it is only you stepping on them. You think you're climbing higher. Lies you tell yourself. Your road is sinking deeper and deeper into the blood-soaked mud. There is a way to end it. Aval responds, I know. It is in front of me. He forms his hand to a grip pointing towards the tower. A blade, impossibly cold yet bright like a torch, flared up from nothing. In a moment, the curved saber froze the surrounding putrid sludge that then burst into particle-filled air. His wings jet him high up, the air cones around him as he reaches the tower. The burnt substances struck, slid, and bounced off his metallic armor. He circles around the tower at a great distance in height. His eyes were focused on the structure, but his senses were limited, but not by his organs or his suit, but by his sphere of mind, his nous. He scanned the periphery, all clear. He focused on the tower. The whole tower was a concentration of mania. Sword readied, he gradually descended closer with each turn. From the curve of his trajectory, and with a spin of his wrist, he cut a man-sized hole through the ceiling. The material did not resist. The blade slid through. The stone instantly melted and cooled. There was a glass chamber on a wall. In it was a suspended woman. Her stomach bulged with a fetus, highlighted by energy, permeating through her flesh. He could feel the buzzing neuron networks in the fetus and woman's brain. He could sense more networks in different patterns from the other levels in the tower. All of them accumulate to being the monster, or more accurately, to being a vehicle for the monster to traverse into this realm. A monster feeding their destructive thoughts, blinding them to walk your slaughtering. I will feed you your destruction, and serve your remains to your avian scourge. Deus Avem Daveum. You are just a beast who makes only mockeries. And besides, you mistake me for my sister. Daveum? You are searching for Daveum? Al could feel the dragon grin. Are you acting on a sense of duty, a moral obligation, or spite? Either way, you narrow yourself to a few paths, driving along on flawed motives. Disgusting pest. I have none. I do as I see fit, motivated by what you would call madness. A candle to a star to the night sky I am. You and your kind live on a boat, struggling to mold the universe to what you think makes sense. Your jokes are on yourselves. The room glows and stones tremble. Heat and smoke flowed through the opening cracks. Owl felt the rumbling through his suit and into his bones. He drew his sword, held the defensive stance. Pitiful. I am tired of my flesh puppets. This ends nothing, Night Raptor. A bright flash, an obscured object smacked him. It parried his sword, but it was so strong. Owl tumbled in the air. Molten stone droplets and ice shards filled the area like a cloud, replacing the tower's roof. His ears rang. Pillars of smoke trailed upwards, and the air shuddered. On their ends, a tongue of flame, pushing teeth. With a bone-chilling roar, they soar through the air. They curve and spin as they trail Avil. He grabs his thoughts. Then focused beams of invisible light strike the missiles. Their movements turned drunk as their senses were dulled. As the missiles flew with no control, a massive serpent of rusted metal slithers through the air. It had a humanoid skull, a pair of mandibles lined with teeth, formed from a human's jaw. A long strip of flesh hung from the unnatural opening at the bottom of the mouth. The missiles all at once burst into raging emulation. Burning fluids splatter and stick to Avol's armor. This was unlike any other fire. It was manic. The metal melted and froze and then melted again. The plate armor expanded and then contracted and then expanded again. The different portions were shifted between heat and cold over and over. The materials gave out and tore into flakes, bits, and powder. All of that in a matter of moments. Underneath was a softer layer of flexible armor. It was not as durable and protective as the rigid plates, but better than nothing. Tumbling wildly through the air, the wings twisted and turned at breakneck speed, switching from angle to angle. The air around them shifted, and hot wind jetted out. Movement on each axis slowed down. Out of the smoke, the Anax leaped out and closed its jaw on the prey. Avon used his jets to spin him. His blades struck in quick succession. They slowed, but the mandibles and teeth did not break. It felt like clashing metal against metal. Sparks burst out in contact. Avo did not step back. He parried while moving forward. He was too close for the jaws to clamp onto him. He wanted to stab it straight through the forehead. But the long, dangling piece of flesh was a prehensile tongue. It struck and wrapped around the man. It constricted him. His arms and wings were wrapped tight close to his torso, keeping him from moving. He tried to spin his wrist to strike with his sword, but it cut like a butter knife to the toughest animal tendon. He was now right up close to the monster's eyes. They were the darkest of black, with bright flames flowing around them. Everything seemed to pause on the outside, but inside, Avol's mind was besieged. His mental fortress was being hacked and bombarded. From all angles, serpentine tendrils dig at the defenses. Missiles of all sorts launched out at the futile attempt of deterring. At this range, the previously annoying claws were now right at the gates. Fragments of memories being uncovered. Sense of them. It only roused the beast further and further. While the defenses were dispersed, the beast focused its main tendril to the gate. When he got close, the dragon was surprised that the gates were not steel, but were wood. It caved with a strike of menial strength. He slithered in as the serpentine creature he is. With his serrated belly, he sliced Avol's mind, and his toxic saliva from his forked tongue seeped into the wounds. Within the first chamber the annex found himself in was a memory. A long time ago, Avon used to be any other human, small and curious. He was in a garden. There were many creatures, birds in the air, fish in a pond, and insects on the ground with Avon. He cuttered off a single ant from a line. He used a finger close enough to nudge the ant around, but not enough to crush it. He moved it away from a long line of many other ants into a flat patch. Once there, he got another ant, and then another, and then another. He kept turning his finger around them, herding them into a circle. Eventually, without gathering them himself, more ants walked towards the circle. He kept spinning until eventually he stopped. He removed his hand and observed. The ants were now on their own, walking around in a spiral, with many more walking towards it and towards the center. Entertained, but not by much, and not for long. There's not much that he could seemingly get out of it. He moved to a different memory. He's not here to enjoy the memories. He is here to change how Avol thinks. He felt the excitement of what it would be like to have a pet elucidator. A pet that will behave almost exactly like he normally would. All his intellect and prowess, but all in service to him. But time does not work like it does outside of the mania-induced minds that they are in. So he chose to indulge just a bit. He sees adult Avol swimming in a lake. He dived deep, and there he swam constantly. He got caught in a whirlpool. He spun, went deeper. His air escaped him. The bubbles formed another spiral. Intrigued, the annex kept going further. He dived into the water and sank with him. There, Al was with a rope, unfurling it, and then wrapped it again into yet another spiral, only to unfurl it again and wrapped it again. He figured that he traveled into a memory section of the mind. It was not the engine room, so he returned to the entrance. There were no chips and splinters of wood scattered on the ground. The wreckage of the wooden gate was not found. Instead, there was a portcullis, and behind it a steel gate, sealed so tight it had no seam. He did not know how many gates were behind it. Startled, but not debilitatingly perturbed, the serpent grew arms out of its forked tongue. It stretched forwards to reach into dark and narrow crevices and to peer into multiple angles at once. There was something useful, another memory, that did not appear like any other. It was a cloudy autumn night, based on orange and brown colored leaves in the dark casted forest. The only lighting was from the moon and a small yellow light within the woods. He approached, slithering under the trees and thick layers of leaves on the forest floor. There was the elucidator, wearing a hide cloak and eating a whole leg of a six-legged animal that was much bigger than the man himself. The animal was roasting above a pit of fire. How he managed to slay such a beast was the apparent utility of the memory. The Anax figured that he could get hints to find the mechanism of his mind from memories like this. It seemed that Avol was startled. Was there something else in the forest? The man stood up. He ripped off the remaining meat off the bone with his mouth as he scanned the surroundings. He turned back and sat back down. He broke the femur with a stone and then proceeded to grind it. Intrigued, the dragon continued his observation. When a thick cloud concealed the moon, Avol threw his hide cloak over the fire, sending the whole area back into darkness. The beast could still sense him with the help of his tongue, so he approached closer. Then Avol removed the cloak as fast as he threw it down, revealing glowing embers. He blew and fanned the cloak hard. They glowed brighter and flew, spreading around the forest. Massive walls of flame burst out around the circular clearing. Despite its hard scales, its forked tongue and mouth was suddenly scorched. He looked around, searching for the man. This was not just a memory. Strangely, the flames were reflective, like waving mirrors, and there the Anax saw a view of his own eyes. He was stunned. Then, leaping out from behind the wall, was Aval, wrapped in the fire-resistant cloak. He opened up, revealing the now sharpened bone wrapped within his wrist. His eye burst open, Aval's weapon arm going wrist deep into the beast's head. Back within the physical realm. For a moment, stunned, the tongue slightly loosened. With a thought, the jets responded and pushed the maximum. Owl slipped through the tongue. Sol, umbra, meos. The blade pierced through the roof of the dragon's mouth. The dragon's mania and Owl's lucidity clashed. It screeched. The face exploded. An eye popped, and the tongue fell off, beginning to erode away from the base. With the help of his wings, he landed roughly. He rolled as he hit the ground. His suit alarmed. It notified him of a long list of damages. He coughed, and red blood hit his visor. His eyes were red, and his right arm fractured in multiple places and dislocated. A wing detached all crumpled. The other was still holding but broken in half. He hastily placed the detached wing into its socket. The explosion cleared out much of the smoke. He saw the serpent was just an attachment to the larger dragon. The whole skeleton around the tower was the dragon. The ribs splayed out, and webs of veins grew from each connecting one rib to the other. Focusing his mind, his solos into space above and through the zone of alienation. Responding similarly to his suit, his warship ignites its jets, turning its guns and readies its missiles. While the human fleets were busy engaging each other, Alval's ship was just at the periphery of the battle. On the edge of the zone of alienation, the ship sailed. Ahead of it, around the planet, was like an ever-shifting wild bush, the thorns of maddened space-time cracking like lightning, ripples in space moving like auroras, rubble from the moon and countless spacecraft, unmistakable from grains in a sandstorm. His Solus navigates his ship through the madness like yarn through a maze. His spacecraft resembled the airships of the old homeworld of man. It had jets jutting out of the main frame, pulling space from the front to get behind the ship, but in the ruthless labyrinth of the sphere of alienation. Without Aval's guidance, it would lose itself, and its atoms would lose their integrity. Aval planned out a pattern of strikes with all of the ship's varied weaponry. He programmed it to track the target while flying in confusing directions. The commands sent straight to it through his Solus. His suit tightened and stiffened around his broken arm. He got up and ran towards the annex. Its face was gone, however. The cranium was still there. It was divided into 3 mandibles. Within was a maw filled with thousands upon thousands of teeth, appearing like a parasitic blood-sucking fish. The remaining eye was now a compound eye, akin to many insects. It was on a long, flexible, and moving stalk. The ribs were now far larger as they were moments ago. They flapped, and the dragon lifted into the air. The eye stalk turned around the body and pointed towards Aval. He pointed his blade and focused his Solus on it. For a moment, blinded, but the dragon was unwavered. Aval jumped into the ponds of liquid decay. The beast's maw opened, and teeth torrented out in supersonic speed. They flew in such velocity and in such rapidness, it was akin to a constant high-pressure flow of fluid. The teeth hit the marshland, erupting the mud and murky water. The tower was hit and shattered to gravel. By twirling his sword in front of him, he dug a hole through the soil like a drill. The vaporized crystals that arose from the digging were indistinguishable from the steam from the explosions. He burrowed deep and tunneled far. O2, warning, Aval's suit notified him. It closed its mouth as the teeth replenished. The vibrations under the ground stopped. The monster hovers above the clouds and circles the area. Aval peeked out of the ground in water, blade pointing at the eye again. And again it opened its maw, this time right before it fired. Another blinding burst from the blade. Following that was a cloud of steam. Nonetheless, it fired first at the center, then in a circle around the steam cloud and spiraled closer to the center again, all in rapid, fully automatic fire. Bravo just returned under. Its firing stopped when it noticed something at a distance far above it. It was Avol's ship, arriving like the sunrise. It had its sights locked on target and constantly tracking. A salvo of missiles descended. It fired teeth at them. They opened and dispersed, launching even more missiles. They intercepted some of them and exploded. As it was shooting the missiles, a barrage of ludicrously fast railgun bullets zoomed and burst clouds. Then pillars of bright light shone like the sun itself. The missiles, bullets, and lasers all struck synchronously. The dragon was knocked down. However, it was mostly intact. Its surface was scorched and battered. The ribs and vertebrae on the top were fractured like twigs. Its insides were ferociously responding. Flame like liquid erupted out of it. They moved like arms and tentacles reorganizing and rebuilding itself. Its new carapace glistened. It had long arms that sprouted from the tips of its ribs. They had large jet-like engines on them. It had a second head for a tail, filled with just as many teeth. The ship fired again. It was in a different part of the sky now. It was constantly moving in a confusing pattern as it rearmed, recooled, and reloaded its magazines and weapons. It made it challenging for the dragon to hit, but the monster was no fool. The dragon accelerated. He began flying in wild paths, and in ways no life form can. A filament of mania sprung above the annex. One head continued to fire, intercepted the missiles. The other head continued to fire onto the ground. The filament dispersed the lasers, and its new armor reduced the force from impacting bullets. Its speed and agility dodged a large quantity of shots. The ones that landed were easily deflected. The ones that were supposed to land were easily deflected. The ship's defenses were failing. Teeth were going through the counters. They landed and burned through the armor and hull. The ship was full of holes, burning like a furnace, and losing altitude. Its own guns struggled to parry the series of walls of projectiles. Its total death was stalled by many design features: sacrificial top layers of slanting armor, architecture that focuses the damage in relatively expendable areas from spreading to vitals. Owl may be able to divide his attention in half, but appears to be pinning them both. He realized that there is no more cheap tricks that could win this battle. The dragon will only get stronger. The game of hide and seek is over. He drilled through the ground while tracking his ship. He delivered commands. The ship began firing its weapons in new patterns. Lasers, railguns, and missiles were no longer in sync. The dragon concluded that the ship's weapons and reloading systems were failing. They were. It moved, dodged the lasers, and the next beam. It moved again, dodged one bullet, then the next, and the next, and the next. It could now easily predict them. Avol received a message from the ship. It only had moments left. All of its railguns were down, lasers melted. He commanded it to launch everything it had left. 2 missiles sprung out. The ship glowed bright in the sky. The flames incinerated all the way through to its vitals. The dragon saw the 2 missiles launch out, but only one flew towards him. The second merely tumbled down. It opened and released its salvo. The annex countered it with its own volley. Metal clashed metal. The sky turned to a blaze. Then, while the first maw reloaded, the second missile woke up and fixed its trajectory, just as planned. Then a bright flash. The annex was blinded from below. Its teeth failed to intercept. It was close enough for Avol's remaining wing to launch him towards it. Avol was in the air, pointing his blade right onto its maw while it reloaded. It attempted to fire a half-loaded salvo. The missiles flew past him and struck onto the teeth right as they were leaving the mouth. Fire erupted, landing onto the head itself. Its own mouth began shedding away. Avol landed on its second head. He slashed and stabbed, but the blade only grazed the metal that made up the exterior of this beast. He looked around. The colliding manic and lucid energy erupted. From the entry wound, cracks spread along the skeleton. Alvo, putting his grit to it, sliced down and ran the length of its spine with his sword, carving deep and forwards. Crack, snap, clang, the screams of metal and bones breaking. The sound of hot smoke belched out of the carvings. Scalding hot black droplet-filled gas vented out and widened the openings. The dragon crashed, its wounds cascading. The crystallization of its fluids expanded far and deep like lightning. It squealed and rolled as it used whatever manipulative organ left to rip chunks of ruinous rusting to save itself. Alvo could clearly hear and comprehend its physical wailing, but he heard the dragon's mind laughing hysterically. There was not the slightest amount of empathy. There was utmost disgust. It struck the quagmire below. Then a tall mushroom cloud of flaked rust and dank sludge stretched high, higher than the old tower. As the mess settled, Alvo's suit wrapped and tightened around his injuries. A long metal fragment in his stomach, and another broken limb. His right leg. His helmet was cracked open. The combined taste and texture strangled his exposed face to the warm soup of methane and rotten flesh. The thick viscosity oozed in his fractured visor. The red danger alarms of O2, 0, fought to blare through the slime. His wings and jets are all gone. He tried moving his arms and legs, twisting and turning. He felt the ground, soft and muddy. He rose up, choking on the mucus-like substance. He clenched and squeezed his stomach, chest, and throat. The vile fluid sludged out, and a rending pain burst in his gut, leg, face, ribs, and arm. There was more than just mucus leaking. His blood and senses were too. The sensation of his body ripping itself apart. But at the same time, there was something bizarrely tingling in his comedic part of his mind. A growl of pain for each exhale and a single chuckle for each inhale. A smell of blood, filth, grime, rot, and metal filled his face. He crawled out to muddy ground. He slowly got up. His right leg failed to function. He hit the mud again. The shrapnel in his gut plunged deeper and turned. The metal wormed around. He vomited more. That made the metal turn more. He hit his face on the dirt again. He looked around. There, not so much of a stretch away, a bulbous eye with a cord. He sharpened his mind. He stood up, then plunged his fist into his abdomen. He pulled out metal that went in one way, then out the back, then turned and twisted, then out the side. He walked towards the dragon's severed eye. Looking around, there was nothing left. "You're right. I do guide many others to die in circles, fueled by their own madness, like ants. I derived that method from your kind, so that I could lure in more of you." The annex chuckled, amused. "Your desperation will dry out all of your fading time. The depths will eventually, inevitably, drown your sinking plane. There is no escape." Alvo stabs it with his sword. It bursts, deflates, and then fizzes away. Alvo falls to the ground. Looking up at the sky, an object was slowly gliding down to him. It shifted between colors as it swayed in the wind. As it got close, it came to the shape of a feather. The Veum.